Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. Cal- uh, California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose. This is their second trial. Their first trial ended in a mistrial, for both of them. And that ended in 1993. We are now reading through the transcript of the 1996 trial. So that's kind of where we're at. But I should tell you, this is the state's case, part 12, and we're going to go over Grant Walker, the pool maintenance repairman's testimony shortly. But up first, I do have a couple housekeeping items. If you haven't heard already, this is really, really great news. The brothers, it has been announced by Governor Gavin Newsom. Apparently, he has a new podcast. I don't know anything about it, but he has a new podcast. And on his podcast, he announced yesterday that, or I'm sorry, this will be for you, it'll be 2 days ago, I believe. As I'm recording this, so on the 11th, Tuesday of this week, Governor Gavin Newsom announced on this new podcast that the brothers will be going up in front of a parole board June 13th of this year, which is exciting news. By that time, the risk assessment should be completed. He ordered a risk assessment for the brothers last month. So it's interesting because there was a press conference last month from Nathan Hochman basically stating that he was not going to endorse their habeas corpus. He was going to recommend that it be denied, all the garbage that he spewed forth. He even almost challenged Governor Newsom to do something. Well, shortly thereafter, Gavin Newsom ordered the risk assessment, which perfect because it was kind of almost like an answer back to Nathan Hochman, like, are you kidding me? Maybe we should look at this because they meet every qualification, every criteria for resentencing. So that happened last month, and then just this past week, DA Hochman came out again with a very unnecessary press conference, total PR stunt, to again disparage the brothers, talk about what liars they are, and basically every single family member that came up and stood and sat on the stand and testified that the brothers were abused in some form or fashion. So basically, he's calling the entire family liars. And basically, he said that he would consider, possibly would consider endorsing clemency or resentencing he can't do clemency, but resentencing. He would consider endorsing their resentencing if and only if the brothers apologize, take accountability, confess up that they lied all these years and the abuse never happened and all this garbage that Hochman spewed. The following day, however, Governor Newsom makes this announcement that the brothers will be going up in front of the parole board. So it's almost like both times there was this press conference with Hochman basically stating that the brothers are liars, and then shortly thereafter, in response, Governor Gavin Newsom says, let's look at risk assessment. Let's look at parole board hearings. And not just look at it, like he scheduled it. So it is scheduled. They have a parole board hearing coming up June 13th, which is awesome news. I'm going to play for you very quickly a little snippet from Gavin Newsom's podcast. Apparently, this is him talking right after, talking about how Hochman is not going to be endorsing the resentencing.
The court resentencing will continue to go forward. The new DA, is pulling back, recommending from the Menendez brothers to be resentenced, but it doesn't impact the process that's underway, that review for clemency in my office or the independent risk assessment that will.
So the risk assessment will still go forward. The petition for clemency is still being looked into. So Things are still moving forward for the brothers. Like I said in my last video where we went over Nathan Hockman's awful announcement, where titled "Nathan Hockman is a Tool." If you missed that, we did a reaction of all the family members and attorneys and things talking about the statements from DA Hockman. So now I lost my train of thought. Um, so that's not impacted at all. So even the fact that just the fact that DA Hockman is opposed to the brothers getting out, opposed to their resentencing, it doesn't matter in the long run because the judges are going to decide resentencing and habeas, and Gavin Newsom is going to decide clemency. And that risk assessment is going to be a crucial component to determining that. And they are like the lowest risk of crime, of the lowest risk rate to society, I should say. Continuing on with what he was saying.
Will be concluded on
Sorry, let me
or
back up.
the process that's underway, that review for clemency in my office, or the independent risk assessment that will be concluded on June 13th by the Board of Parole Hearings. And I'll repeat that on June 13th. Both Lyle and Erik Menendez independently will have their final hearing. A report then will be submitted to me on the 13th of June for consideration. We will submit that report to the judge for the resentencing, and that will weigh into our independent analysis of whether or not to move forward with the clemency application to support a commutation of this case. So this was a very significant announcement from the DA this week, but it doesn't fundamentally change the facts as it relates to the independent investigation in my office, the Board of Parole Hearings, or fundamentally change or alter the process that's underway with the resentencing. It just changes the recommendation from one supporting with the previous DA in LA resentencing and one now with the current DA opposing it. The court.
Whoops. Okay. So I hope that helped clarify things. It does for me. I think it basically Hockman's full of hot air. He can talk all he wants. He can spew all the lies he wants, but the facts of the case are there. The judges are going to look at the facts of the case and the law and apply that law. And if they do that, that might very likely mean that the brothers find some path to freedom, which is awesome. So either the judges or Gavin Newsom, who I won't say anything about him politically, but this one thing that he's doing is pretty darn awesome in my eyes because I think prison reform is a very, very, very important thing and rehabilitation. All right, so let us move on to what we're here for, which is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. We're going to read through the transcript, and we are starting today, week 3, Grant Walker, pool maintenance repairman. He did testify for the prosecution. I didn't have time for a poll, sorry. So I am just going to go forward with doing his testimony. I got to put up polls for these guys. So look for those polls, or maybe I will just do a one shot poll saying, "Do you even want the polls?" Maybe we'll just read everything. I don't mind. All right, so let's move on. So I like to open up each of my, as you may know, I like to open up each of my recordings of these transcript readings, going over the people who are representing the state and Lyle and Erik. Today, I thought it would be fun to create a slideshow. And this is also available in the links below. You can find the link and download this, look at it anytime. I know a lot of us are visual learners, so that's one reason I did it. And I personally, I like to picture who I'm I like to picture people in my head as I'm reading their words and things like that. So here is a slideshow. This is the prosecution side so far of the state prosecuting Eric and Lyle. This would be Gil Garcetti, the DA of Los Angeles District. So he was the DA from 1992 to 2000. He shifted careers after he lost a bid, I think, because it's an elected position. So he lost a bid for his third term. So after that, he shifted careers and went into professional photography. And you can check out his photography at garcetti.com. That is GARCETTI, two T's. And he does have some books. I think I read somewhere that he had like 11 plus books or something like that. Photography books and things like that. So he started a profession with photography. So good for him, I guess. All right. So here is the next person in the prosecution list. Backtrack. We've never heard Gil Garcetti once in this case so far. I don't know if he's in the room. I don't think so. But the people that are primarily prosecuting the case are Carol Nahara and David Kahn. So Carol, let's go back to Carol. She is the deputy district attorney, or was, I should say, was the deputy district attorney for the county of Los Angeles for over 28 years. It's a long time. And she is now currently a Los Angeles Superior Court judge. So she's moved up in the ranks. And that is from her LinkedIn page, that picture. Whoops, wrong way. All right, David Kahn is next. He is the other prosecutor in this case that we hear from. He went into a private practice after 18 years in the Los Angeles DA's office. Sadly, he died in 2017 at the age of 56. Don't really have much more information than that, other than that. All right, Lyle's defense team. We've got up first is Michael Judge, which we again have yet to hear from. But he has served as the Los Angeles County Public Defender from 1994 to 2010. He passed away in 2018 at the age of 74. One of the reasons why maybe he might be what's the word I'm looking for? Admitted. He might be admitted as a lawyer for Lyle because maybe it's his public defender office, but he's not actually the one prosecuting the case, and it's these other two that we're going to talk about next who work in his office who are prosecuting the case. So that might be a reason why we don't hear from Michael Judge. We've got Charles Gessler. He worked as a public defender who specialized in death penalty litigation. He died in 2019 at the age of 85. So it's sad to find out that a lot of these individuals here are passed away. Terry Towery, who is also on Lyle's defense team, worked as a public defender from 1986 to 2022, and she is currently retired according to her LinkedIn. So good for her. I don't have a whole lot of information about everybody, but some of them we have more information, like Leslie Abramson or Abrahamson as Nathan Hockman, who is a tool, by the way. Nathan Hockman is a tool. I should buy that domain, nathanhockmanisatool.com. Don't do that, anybody. I might buy that. Anyways, Leslie Abramson represented Erik in both the 1993 and 96 trials. She became a public defender after law school. She became listed as inactive as an attorney since 2023. So she's still been working up until just about 2 years ago, which is pretty crazy to think about. All right. Then, sorry for the blurry picture, but we don't have really great pictures of some of these characters. Barry Levin. This is a really sad story. This one actually made me dive a little bit deeper. So, Barry Levin was on Eric's defense team. He was recognized as a high-profile attorney with famous clients. He died of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot at the age of 54 after suffering from, I want to say, Goucher's disease. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I want to hold this thought because we're going to come back to him. So, Barry Levin, Goucher's disease, and self-inflicted gunshot. And lastly, as you know, we have the judge, Stanley Weisberg. He was a former prosecutor, which I didn't know, and he was an LA County Superior Court judge. He also presided over the Rodney King trials. If you are too young to remember, Rodney King was a black man who was beat very severely by some white police officers, and it became a huge racial outrage yeah, as you can imagine, in LA in the 90s. There were riots, there were all sorts of things. He was the presiding judge over or over some of the cases for law enforcement in the Rodney King case. And because a lot of individuals got acquitted in that case, there were riots and things and whatnot. And it was not a good social and political time in LA at that moment. So that was around the time, too, of the brothers, of their, hold on, let me look up that date. Now I need to know. All right, so the Rodney King beating happened in 1991, March of 91, by Los Angeles Police Department. And so if that was 91, imagine, it takes to litigate these things, it could take a few years. So probably the next 3 to 4 years was probably maybe even more of, litigating these cases, which was going on concurrently during the same time of the Menendez cases. So, yeah, they were going on at the same time. All right, I want to go back to Barry Levin because this case kind of it saddened me. So I found an article about his death, and so this was in 2001. And it says high-profile criminal attorney Barry Levin, who helped handle Eric Menendez's homicide defense and more recently represented actor Robert Blake, was found dead Saturday of a single gunshot wound to the head at a veterans cemetery, according to officials. Levin, who is 54, appeared to have committed this act, says FBI spokesman Matthew McLaughlin. Levin suffered from Goucher's disease, said Ron Dorfman, a fellow attorney who spoke at a news conference Saturday evening at the cemetery. Goucher's disease is an inherited enzyme deficiency disorder whose victims bleed and bruise easily. Levin was in constant, severe pain and had already had a shoulder replaced because of the disease, according to Dorfman. Levin was found slumped over the steering wheel of his vehicle about 2 p.m. The FBI was investigating because the death occurred at the Los Angeles National Cemetery, which is a federal property. That's interesting. Best known for, I don't want to go on into all of that, but oh wait, no, I do because Leslie Aronson says something. Best known for her role in Menendez trial. Levin, a former city police officer, was one of the best known attorneys in Los Angeles. Levin was a co-counsel for Menendez, who was sentenced to life without parole in 1996, with brother Lyle for taking the lives of his parents. Attorney Leslie Abramson, who was Levin's co-counsel on the Menendez case, described Levin as all heart for his clients. He had a tremendous understanding for people, especially veterans. He was a great guy with a fair amount of tragedy in his own life. He's been a colleague and a friend for many years and a wonderful lawyer. He was always my hero. Levin recently, so that was said by Leslie Abramson. Levin recently represented Blake, star of Beretta TV series, whose wife's recent homicide is unsolved. Not recent because this is in 2001. Levin was also the lead defense attorney in a case stemming from alleged corruption in the city's police department. He represented Sergeant Edward Ortiz, who, with two other officers, was convicted in November of conspiracy and other charges alleging they framed alleged gang members. The convictions were overturned. So, all right, there you have it. I wanted to share that because I thought that was sad that he had that Goucher's disease. I never heard of it. I have chronic pain, sometimes very severe, and so I feel for him, and I'm sorry that he was going through that. So, all right, let's get to it. Now that we're already 20 minutes in, apologies, but I thought that was some good content giving you guys some visuals. So definitely go download that and take a look whenever you'd like. All right, so we are starting on October 23rd, 1995. We're back in court. Um, the jury entered the room. The following proceedings were held. Judge Weisberg says, the jury's in the jury box. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to resume with the trial. The people may call their next witness. Ms. Nahara says, thank you, Your Honor. The people call Grant Walker. Grant Walker was called to testify. He's sworn in, all that good stuff. Direct examination begins. So I'm assuming Ms. Nahara says this, but it says by Mr. Walker. I don't know. There's a lot of typos sometimes in these things. All right, so I'm assuming this is Ms. Nahara that says, sir, would you, or maybe she's saying, Mr. Walker, would you tell the jury what your occupation is? I'm a swim pool maintenance man, repairman. And was that your occupation on August 19th, 1989? Yes, it was. And on August 18th, 1989, at approximately 2 in the afternoon, were you called or did you go to 722 Elm Drive? Yes, I did. Was this a Saturday? Yes, it was. And when you arrived at 722 Elm Drive, where did you go? I went to the rear of the house in the alley, and after you arrived, sorry, I'm reading, like, not breaking in between. I like to read fast, if you haven't noticed, and then I get all slurry. All right, so, and after you arrived at the rear of the house in the alley, did you go somewhere? Yes, I entered through the rear gate. Where did you go? When I entered through the rear gate, there was a long pathway and the tennis court off to my right, and it was sitting at a table near the tennis court was. Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor, that's non-responsive. The court says, all right, it's a little bit beyond the scope of the question. Ask your next question, please. Ms. Nahara says, thank you, Your Honor. After you walked through the rear of the house, did you see any people there? Yes, I did. And how many people did you first see when you walked through the door? I saw two people. Where were they? They were sitting at a table near a tennis court. And after you saw them, what happened, if anything? I approached them and I told them that I was a repairman to fix their spa and whether it was convenient on that Saturday to do it. And these two people that were there, what were their sex? One was male and one was female. Were they older people? Yes, they were. Did they identify themselves as Mr. and Mrs. Menendez? No, they didn't. At some point, did you learn who they were? Yes. When was that? I approached them and I asked them. And what happened after you asked them who they were? Then Mrs. Menendez spoke to me and said it was all right to do the repair that Saturday. And after she told you it was all right to do the repairs, what did you do? Then I proceeded to do my work. And did you see anyone else out there besides Mr. and Mrs. Menendez? Yes, I did. And who else did you see out there? There were three other people. And these three other people, where were they? There was three on the tennis court. Were all three on the tennis court? Well, there was two on the tennis court and then one in proximity. Now, the one in proximity of the tennis court is that individual present in court today. Yes, he is. Could you identify him for the record? Yes, it was Erik, the gentleman in the striped shirt. Ms. Nahara says, indicating for the record, Your Honor, the defendant, Erik Menendez. Yes, says the court. The individuals that you saw on the tennis court, do you see either of them in court? Yes, I see that one of them. Could you identify that person for the record? The one in green, Lyle. Ms. Nahara says, for the record, Your Honor, indicating the defendant, Lyle Menendez. The court says yes. Ms. Nahara says, thank you, Your Honor, and may I approach for a moment? Sir, showing you what has been marked Exhibit 2 for identification, could you step down for a moment? I'm handing you a poker, or a pointer, I should say. If you could just step down for just one moment and show the jury, first of all, take a look at the diagram that has been marked Exhibit 2. Now, are you somewhat familiar with that diagram? Yes, I am. Okay. Can you point out to the jury where it was that you came to the Menendez house? I parked my vehicle here and I entered through this gate. For the record, Your Honor, showing my right of the little diagram where there's a marking saying 18-3. Okay. What happened after you went through that area? This is where Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were seated, approximately here. I'm sorry, I can't hear, says Mr. Levin. The court says, you have to speak up a little bit, please. The witness says, okay, I'm sorry. Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were sitting right here, and he points. Ms. Nahara says, indicating for the record just below the area that's been identified previously as the tennis courts. And you said that you went to do some work for them with regards to the pool, is that right? Yes, the pool. And where did you go? Okay, the pool equipment is here, he points. Ms. Nahara says, indicating a little area to the left of the tennis court, Your Honor. The witness says the problem was what they call an override switch. The pool equipment is on a time clock. Now, if that's set like from 9 to 6 at night and it shuts off at 6, if they wanted to use their spa, they would have to come all the way back here and turn it on manually. There's an override switch on this wall that wasn't functioning properly, and that's what I was repairing. So this way, they could come out at night and turn on this switch and it would work rather than them have to go back here. That's what my job was. If I may, when we're talking about this area indicating an override switch, that's an area that you pointed to on the diagram just below the area that's been marked the den for the record. Right. And when you first arrived and you spoke to Mr. and Mrs. Menendez, after you spoke to them, did you go somewhere? Yes. Then I proceeded to the area. There's 4 switches here. I proceeded to find out which one operated which to start the repair. And at some point, did you have to go back to the other area you pointed to as being where the pool equipment was? Yes, because there were 4 switches and they were all poorly marked. I had to turn on the switch and walk over here to see if anything happened and go back and forth several times. And as you were going back and forth several times, did you see or you testified that you saw the defendant, Erik Menendez, is that right? Yes. And where was he? I believe the first time I saw him he was approximately here somewhere, indicating an area on the tennis court, the lower half, the lower part. And did you see him anyplace else? Well, he was here, and then sometimes he was out here. And this proximity between here and here. Ms. Nahara says, and here, for the record, being the area towards the bottom of the tennis court where you've identified Mr. and Mrs. Menendez to be. Is that right? Yes, correct. And the defendant, Lyle Menendez, where did you see him? He was playing tennis approximately in the end of the court. Ms. Nahara says, okay, and if you could sit down. And, sir, and Your Honor, I have an exhibit that has previously been marked as 361. I'd like it marked, I believe it's 115, which is the next number. Ms. Abramson says, can I see it? The court says 115. Ms. Nahara says, if I may approach. The court says yes. And, sir, showing you what has been marked 115, if you would take a look at that and tell me if you recognize what I've just placed before you. Yes, I do. And can you tell us what that is? That's a drawing I made on the area I was working on. And have you testified in this matter before? Yes, I have. And in the course of that testimony, were you asked by the defense to make this diagram? No, I wasn't. Were you asked by someone to make this diagram? Yes, I was. And was that the diagram you used to show where the various individuals were when you first testified? Yes. And is that basically what you have testified to here using the diagram that is now Exhibit 2? Yes. Ms. Abramson says, object to that, Your Honor, calls for conclusion. The court says overruled. Ms. Nahara says, now, while you were walking back, or how long did it take you to affect the repairs that you were doing to the swimming pool on the spot? I'd say approximately 30 minutes, 40 max. And while you were walking back and forth from the override switch to the area where the pool equipment was, did you observe what the individuals, Mr. and Mrs. Menendez, and the defendants were doing? Yes, I did. And starting with Mr. and Mrs. Menendez, what were they doing? They were sitting there watching Lyle play tennis. And what was the defendant, Erik Menendez, doing? He was standing there in the proximity. And what was the defendant, Lyle Menendez, doing? He was playing tennis. Now, at some point, did you observe or hear a conversation between the defendant, Lyle Menendez, and anyone else? Yes, I did. And who was that with? Well, I heard a conversation with Lyle and his parents. And what specifically did you hear? I heard just angry words directed at them. When you say angry words, can you tell us exactly what it is you heard? I don't remember the exact dialogue, I just remember it was anger. Did he cuss? Yes, he did. What words did he use? Well, swear words. Okay, are we talking about the defendant Lyle Menendez now? Yes. What swear words did he use? Well, words of anger to do with tennis. Basically, they were playing, he was playing tennis and he was angry, so he would swear, and it seemed to be directed towards his parents. You just said that it was a anger out of his playing tennis, and now it's directed at his parents. I think someone's lying. He just said, why is this not staying on the highlight feature for me? I don't know. All right, so he just said, well, it was out of anger from tennis. He was playing tennis and he was angry, so he would swear. And then that was directed at his parents. His parents aren't even on the court, and he's on the court playing tennis. How is that directed at his parents? I'm so confused how he could conclude that, but okay. Next question is, are you uncomfortable repeating the words that he said? Yes, I am. Could you please repeat them for the jury in any event? I'm uncomfortable with this. I would, and I don't remember exactly the words that he said, individually, so I'd rather not say words that I'm not positive he said. Have you testified? When you testified in this matter previously, did you recall him using some swear words? Yes. Did you testify to those swear words? Yes, I did. Could you tell us what it was that you testified to? One word. Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to object to that, Your Honor, if it's not the exact words. And the court says, perhaps you can lay a foundation. Ms. Nahara says, do you recall the defendant, Lyle Menendez, basically using the word F to his mother? Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor, that's leading. That doesn't lay a foundation. The court says, well, I'll let her ask it this way and see if she can establish a foundation. Wow, this judge sucks. By the way, I told you his whereabouts, Judge Weisberg's whereabouts after he retired, have been unknown. So I looked to see if he was dead or alive. He would be about 81 at this time. So I don't know what's going on with Judge Weisberg. He's been leading a very low profile life after he retired. The witness says yes. Well, towards that direction, yes. About the F word towards his mother. Ms. Nahara says, and do you specifically recall him using that word? Yes. And did he use any other cuss words? Yes, he did. And what other cuss word did he use? Well, words of that type. Can you tell us specifically what you recall him saying? Well, I believe I remember him saying the words similar to SHIT. And what would cause him to utter these cuss words if you know? Well, I recall Mr. Levin says objection, calls for speculation. The court sustains that. Ms. Nahara continues. What do you recall, if anything, him doing at the time that he was cussing? It seemed like something wasn't going right with his tennis game. So how was that at the parents'? This guy's lying. And when something wasn't going right with his tennis game, what would he do? He would get upset and swear. And when he got upset and swore, did either his mother or his father respond? I did not see them respond. No. Don't you think if he was swearing directly at his parents, they might respond to that? But if he's just swearing out of frustration for his tennis match, maybe they don't care that he's swearing? Maybe. Just maybe. He says, I did not see them respond. No. And did his mother say anything to him? His mother did talk to him several times while I was there. And what do you recall her saying? It seemed to be tennis related. Did she ever cuss at him? I do not recall her swearing at him, no. Did she ever even raise her voice? No, she didn't. And how often, how long did it go on that the defendant, Lyle Menendez, was swearing? Objection, Your Honor. It assumes facts, not an evidence, calls for conclusion, overruled. Well, it would happen when, like I said, it would happen from time to time while I was there. I wasn't sitting at the tennis court. It only happened when I was in the proximity from time to time when something didn't go right with the game. So he's swearing because he messed up or because his parents expect such have such high expectations of him that when he does the slightest thing and he perceives it as a screw up in his mind, he is hard on himself and he's swearing and cussing and upset with himself. I would suggest maybe he's mad at himself and swearing at him, like swearing at his own performance, not at his parents. Ms. Nahara says, and from what you observed of the defendant, Lyle Menendez, did he appear to be angry? Yes, he did. And who did he appear to be angry at? Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, sustained. Did you observe him yelling at his parents? Yes. Objection, Your Honor, leading and suggestive. The court sustains that. Rephrase the question. Objection sustained. The answer stricken. Blah, the answer is stricken. Mr. Khan says, what did you, Mr. Khan? Oh, is Mr. Khan been? No. How is Mr. Khan asking questions? I thought Ms. Nahara was the one up there. This clerk, or not a clerk, stenographer, made a lot of mistakes, I think, throughout the proceedings. We're only on week 2, and there's been several. All right, so I think this is Ms. Nahara says, what did you observe him doing when he was yelling? Well, it seemed to be because if something didn't go right with tennis and then he would be angry. It looked to me like she was making comments about the game and then if things didn't work out right, then he would get angry and the conversation was back and forth between him and his parents. Don't you think that if he was swearing at his mom, Jose would have some kind of something to say about that, like respect your mother or something? Like I could see him like smacking Lyle upside the head and saying, "Don't talk to your mother that way." Because Jose and Kitty are a unified, tyrannical, torturous, maybe even homicidal, psychopathic couple together, united. They're a united front in how they parent. But I mean, even though there was like a lot of fighting and contention between the two of them, they were still a united front when it came to parenting and how they treated the boys. And if you messed with one parent, you messed with them both. If you did something bad, like both of them could be on your case for something. So it wasn't just, they were unified in what they did. If Lyle smacked one of the kids or punched one of the kids, Kitty didn't say anything. Kitty didn't do anything to stop it. Well, it seemed to be because if something didn't go right in the tennis game, he would be angry. It looked to me like she was making comments about the game, and then if things didn't work out right, then he would get angry. And the conversation was back and forth between his parents and he. So he's not even near them. How's he having this conversation while he's also playing tennis at the same time and swearing? So Ms. Abramson says, "Well, I'm going to object to well, never mind." Ms. Nahira says, "When you said that she would make comments, are you referring to his mother, Mrs. Menendez?" "Well, she would be talking about the tennis." "Now, is she his mother, Mrs. Menendez?" "Yes." "And when she mentioned something about the game and he would get angry, did he?" Ms. Abramson says, "I'm going to object to the question, Your Honor. She didn't say he mentioned the game. Misstates the testimony." Sustained. Ms. Nahara says, "When she spoke to him, what did she tell him?" "It seemed to be tennis related. I'm not familiar with tennis, so it seemed to do with the tennis game. It was, I guess, the best way to express it is that she was probably suggesting something to do with tennis." Ms. Aronson says, "Objection, Your Honor." And Mr. Gessler says, "I'm going to move to strike this, Your Honor, as conclusionary. Conclusionary? Conclusionary. Court says, sustained. The answer is stricken. The jury will be admonished to disregard it." Ms. Nahara continues, "Now, when you say that he would get angry, who was he getting angry at?" Ms. Abramson says, "Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation." The court sustains that. Ms. Nahara says, "When he was he yelling at his parents?" "He was yelling." Ms. Abramson says, "Objection, Your Honor, leading and suggestive, overruled. His anger was directed in their direction." How do you know that? Ms. Nahara says, "And at some point, did the defendant, Erik Menendez, say anything?" "I believe at one time he did, yes." "And who was that directed towards?" "It seemed to be directed towards his parents also." "And what was his demeanor when he was talking to his parents?" "Seems to be angry too." "And do you recall what he said, he being the defendant, Erik Menendez?" "No, I don't." Did both parents appear to be angry at their parent? Did both defendants appear to be angry at their parents? Ms. Abramson says, "Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation." Sustained. So, based on the demeanor that you observed of both defendants, did they appear to be angry at their parents? Ms. Abramson says, "Still calls for speculation." The court says, "Let's break it down. First of all, did they appear to be angry?" Ms. Nahara says, "Based on what you observed, did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, did he appear to be angry?" "Yes." "Did he appear to be angry at his parents?" Objection, calls for speculation. The court says it does. Objection sustained. Ms. Nahara says, did you have an opportunity to observe the defendant, Lyle Menendez, when he was angry?" "Yes." "From his demeanor, did he appear to be angry at his parents?" "Objection, Your Honor, same thing." The court says sustained. It would call for speculation as to who he was angry at, if anybody. Ms. Nahara says, "Who did he appear to be angry at?" The court says, "We've already gone through this. This is something that would call for a conclusion on the part of the witness as to who he was angry at." Ms. Nahara says, well, I believe he testified a few minutes earlier that he appeared to be angry towards his parents. Is that correct? Ms. Abramson says, we objected to that, and I object again, Your Honor. I love her. The court says, okay, regardless of what happened before or whatever testimony is in or not in, the questions can be directed as to the emotional state and with whom he was speaking, things of that nature. But as far as the state of mind of an individual as to who he was angry with, that's a conclusion on the part of the witness. Ms. Nahara says, you testified that the defendant, Lyle Menendez, appeared to be angry. Now, did that defendant, Erik Menendez, also appear to be angry? Yes, on one occasion. And did the defendant, Erik Menendez, appear angry? Uh, uh, did his anger appear to be directed at someone? Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation. Again, same issue as to who was he speaking with, what he was doing, interacting with, things of that nature that the witness observed. As far as a conclusion on his part as to what somebody was thinking, that would be a conclusion and inappropriate, says the court. Ms. Nahara tries again. When you saw the defendant, Erik Menendez, appear to be angry, who was he talking to? Objection assumes facts not in evidence. Overruled. His conversation was directed towards his parents. Ms. Nahara says, now you said that the defendant, Lyle Menendez, appeared to be angry. Is that correct? Yes. Who did he appear to be talking to when he was displaying his anger? He seemed to appear it was directed towards his parents. Now, at some point, did you have some conversation with the defendant, Lyle Menendez? Yes, on one occasion. And when, in the course of your work there, did the conversation take place? Near the end. And how did this come? What was happening when you had this conversation? I was passing by, and he was on the court, and I was passing by. He saw me. Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor, that speculation moved to strike. Court says, okay. The fact that the portion of the answer that says he saw me is stricken as conclusion. Ms. Nahara says, now, as you were passing by, on that later occasion while you were there fixing the pool equipment, did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, at that time appear to be angry? Ask the question again, please. You said that right before you had any kind of conversation with him, did he appear to be angry? Shortly before, yes. And what happened when he saw you? Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation. Again, you haven't established, the court says, again, you haven't established that one person saw the other. Ms. Nahara says, at some point, did the defendant, Lyle Menendez, look up? Yes. Did you make some kind of eye contact, some kind of contact with him? He spoke to me. Now, did his demeanor change when he saw you? Objection, leading, overruled. Yes, he was very pleasant when he spoke to me. Ms. Nahara says, was there a marked difference in his demeanor from before he saw you until after he saw you? Yes, there was. Ms. Nahara asks, was there a marked difference in his demeanor from before he saw you until after he saw you? Yes, there was. Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor, that's vague. The court says, overruled. Can you describe what the scene was? Well, he stopped playing tennis, or at the time, and just spoke to me and just said, hi, how are you doing? That sounds so nefarious. Now, did you notice that there was kind of a marked change in his demeanor? Objection, leading and suggestive, overruled. Can you describe to us what it was? And he just cuts her off and says, while he was intense in playing tennis and upset, then he spoke kindly to me. So maybe he was just mad at tennis and not his parents and not at anyone in particular, just the tennis. Okay. Did he seem to go from being very upset to being cordial to you in the space of a very short time? So? That means absolutely nothing. Objection, Your Honor, leading, overruled. The witness says yes. Ms. Nahara says, did that strike you as odd? Objection sustained. Ms. Abramson says, it's irrelevant, and the court says objection sustained. Ms. Nahara says, now, at some point after Saturday, when you were there fixing the pool, did you hear that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez had lost their lives at that estate? Yes, I heard it Monday. And do you recall being there the previous Saturday? Yes. Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant. Overruled. Did you call the police at that time? No, I did not. Did you call the police any time after you had been at the estate? Like, this guy called the police basically to interject himself into this case to say, I was at their house and I witnessed basically nothing. I mean, yeah. So, Ms. Nahara says, did you call the police? No, I did not. Did you call the police anytime after you had been at that estate? Approximately 3 days later. And what happened when you called the police? I called them and they were interested. And, well, of course they are because they're trying to convict someone. And sometime after you testified in the last trial, did you once again contact the police in some way? My wife did. The question again, please. Were the police contacted by you or some member of your family sometime before you testified in the last trial? Yes. And sometime in July in 1993, did you have a conversation with Detective Zoller? Yes, I did. Was this July 25th, if you recall? Yes. And did you explain to him at that time what you had observed at the Menendez home? Objection, Your Honor. That calls for hearsay. Objection overruled. Witness says yes. Ms. Nahara continues. At that point, did you know who the defendant, Erik Menendez, and the defendant, Lyle Menendez, were? No, I was never introduced to them. When you were there that day on August 19th, 1989, were you or were you not introduced to them? No, I was not. And when you spoke to Detective Zoller, did you know which one was which? No, I did not. Did you later learn which defendant was named what? Yes, I did. And how'd you find that out? I found that from court TV. And did you realize something when you found out what defendant was which? I had the wrong names of the wrong people. So when you say that you had the wrong names of the wrong people, can you explain to us what you had wrong? Yes, I had Erik titled as Lyle and vice versa. So you described Erik as the one out on the tennis court? Correct. At some point after you spoke to Detective Zoller in July of 1993, in August and September of 1993, did you speak to a woman named Cynthia Erdelay? Yes, I did. Is this woman that you understand to be employed by the defense? Cynthia Erdelay, Ms. Erdelay is the woman who she was like the private detective or investigator. She's an investigator that is employed by the defense. So she'll go and investigate leads and things like that when they're working cases. So is this woman that you understand to be employed by the defense? Yes. And did you have conversations with her about what it was you observed at the Menendez home? Yes. And did you understand that you had, in fact, misidentified the two defendants? Ms. Abrams says, Your Honor, at this point, this is calling for hearsay and there's no foundation. Overruled. Witness says yes. You explained the mistake? Yes, I did. And did you always talk to the defense at that time when you called and asked, sorry, and did you always talk to the defense at that time when they called and asked you questions about the event? Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant. The court says it's unclear what you mean by the question. The question is ambiguous. Ms. Nahara says, were you contacted several times by Ms. Erdelay? Yes, I was. Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. Did you answer all of her questions every time she contacted you? Every time. Now, when you spoke to Detective Zoller, but that's not, did you answer them honestly? You could answer questions, but that doesn't mean that you're giving honest or true, accurate representations of what happened. Now, when you spoke to Detective Zoller, did you tell him about the third person that you saw on the tennis court? Yes, I did. How did you describe that person? Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay, no foundation. The court says, why don't you ask him how he would describe them? Now, all right, so how would you describe that person? He was a young man with dark hair. Did you ever describe him in the past as a tennis instructor? He could have been, yes. But I'm asking you, did you ever describe him as a tennis instructor? I don't believe so. Was there anything about him or was he ever introduced to you? No, he wasn't. Do you know if he was a tennis instructor or not? No, I do not. Now, when you were out there on August 19th, 1989, so obviously the day before the homicides took place, could you describe the atmosphere between the defendants and their parents? Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation, overruled. It seemed to be tense. How can you, this is total speculation, the atmosphere between the parent, I don't know. Okay. So did Mrs. Menendez ever seem angry? No, she did not. Did Mr. Menendez ever seem angry? No, he did not. Did Mr. Menendez say anything when all these conversations were going on? I did not hear him say anything. Ms. Nahara says, I have nothing further. So we're going to move on to cross-examination by Ms. Abramson for in the defense of Erik Menendez. Mr. Walker, you ever play tennis? No, Ms. Nahara says, objection, irrelevant. The witness says, have never played tennis. So they were talking over each other. Ms. Abramson says, do you ever watch tennis matches on television? Never. Do you ever watch people playing tennis in person? I have on occasion when I'm doing servicing a pool and they're playing tennis, yes. So when you service pools at the homes of people who have tennis courts? Correct. Do you ever go to a public tennis court and watch tennis? Never. Objection, irrelevant. Overruled, the answer will stand. He says never again. The witness, Ms. Abramson says, how many times have you ever been to 722 Elm Drive? I believe 3 times. Now, who is Leon Bartek? He's a gentleman I did a repair for. He's a service person. He's the person who services the swimming pool, and I did the repair for him. As far as you understood, Mr. Bartek was the regular pool service person for 722 Elm Drive in Beverly Hills? Correct. And he doesn't do repairs of switches. No, he did not. No, he did does not. He does not is what it says. Um yeah, he does not. Why is this not staying on a highlight? I'm getting annoyed. Okay. So when he needs switches repaired, he calls you? Correct. And how many repair jobs do you think you did for Mr. Bartek in 1989? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. You mean all the repairs? Yes. I started working for Leon he doesn't say a date, so I probably only worked, it's hard to say. It's really difficult to say how many times. That's the first year I started working with him. Ms. Abramson says, and what month of that year did you start working with him? It could have been maybe May approximately. And between May and August, how many repair jobs do you believe you did for him? Could have been 6 or 7. And you have the books and records for these repair jobs? Maybe. Objection, irrelevant, overruled. What's your answer? Witness says, no, I do not. Ms. Abramson says, did you destroy them? I never had any. You never had any records. No, still don't. That's bizarre. Now, is it you never had any records for the repair work that you did for Mr. Bartek? Is that what you're saying? Yes, correct. Objection, irrelevant as to anything other than 722 Elm, overruled. Did you have any? Well, you also worked as a pool service person, just like Mr. Bartek, correct? Correct. And how many homes did you service in a week? Say in August of 1989. Objection irrelevant as to time. Overruled. How is that objection irrelevant as to time? It's the same month the homicides happen. Witness says, oh, that's a good question. Probably 38, 40, maybe approximately. And what days of the week would you do the service work? I do service work still 6 days a week. Sunday, I do not do service work. And were you an independent contractor? Were you running your own business when you serviced these 38 to 4, 38 to 40 pools each week? Some of them were, yes. And were others what? Were you working for someone else? Yes, I was working for someone else. And what was the name of that? It was a company, wasn't it? Yes. What was the name of that company? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. Aquasheen, says the witness. How many of these 38 to 40 pools that you did a week came to you through your employment through Aquasheen? Approximately 20. So 18 to 20 you were from your own business. Yes. And you had no records for any of them? I have records for my business, yes. And what kind of records did you have for your business? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. Just said you didn't have records, and now you're backtracking and saying you do have records. So what is it? He says he has billing, monthly billing. Ms. Abramson says, so you would bill the people whose pools you serviced. Correct. Would you bill them weekly or monthly or what? Monthly. And you would send out the bills on the same day every month? No, but I would send out the bills once a month. And did you keep records, ledgers, somewhere indicating if you had to, do anything extra so that the bill would be different than the usual bill? Yes. So you knew how to make, for example, did you do service work on the pools that you regularly serviced? Yes. Repair work? Yes. You wouldn't call someone else to come repair the pools you were working on? No. And when you did that, would you keep a record of that repair work because you would be charging your customers extra? Not exactly. I would have when I purchase a part, I get an invoice from the supply house. I would take that invoice and that part and that I bought, I would connect with the customer I did the repair with. I'm sorry, you would do what? Have an invoice. Yes, I understand that. I had an invoice, okay? If I had a part to fix, a heater, let's say, it was a thermostat, I would use that invoice to recall to bill the customer later. And you would, on the bill to the customer, indicate the extra work for the repair, correct? You'd bill them for that part? Right. Would you give them the invoice so they could see what the part was? Or what the part cost? I'm sorry. No, I'd make an invoice for them. So, were there any parts involved in the job that you did at 722 Elm? No, there were not. And what did you charge for the work that you did that day? I believe that year it'd be $30, just a service call. Wow, that's cheap. Well, for today's times, anyways. That was your standard rate for a service call? Yes, it was. I have to know. I have to know. I'm obsessed with inflation. So $30 inflated to today's money. I'll tell you in 1 second. In today's money, according to some 20, yeah, I don't even know if this is going to be accurate, but it's coming up as $76.86, which would be an increase of $46.86. Um, that's what it's saying it would be today. So that's interesting. So a service call would cost you, and they probably rounded up by now to 100. All right, so that was your standard rate for a service call? Yes, it was. Who would you charge, the Menendez family or Mr. Bartek? I'd charge Mr. Bartek, and then in turn, he would charge the Menendezes. And did you give something to Mr. Bartek in writing so that you could show it to the so that he could show it to the Menendezes? No, I didn't. So he could collect? No, I did not. So you would just eventually charge him, or he just knew how much you charged? He would ask me eventually, yes. What other repair jobs did you do that week of in August of 1989? I have no objection, irrelevant as to time, idea. Overruled, the answer will stand. And was it customary for Mr. Bartek to pay you immediately upon you telling him the work that you did and what the charge was? Yes, it was, sometimes even in advance. So, do you specifically recall when it was after you did well, first of all, do you know if you even told Mr. Bartek that you did this repair work or whether he paid you in advance for this one? I don't recall, but he would call me and ask me if it's completed or not. He'd initiate both calls. So do you have any idea when, if ever, he called you to find out whether the work at the Menendez home was completed? He's pretty finicky about getting things done, so he would call quite frequently. Okay. Right after he asked me to do the repair work, but I do not recall that day, no. So you don't specifically recall when that was? No, I do not. In fact, you don't specifically recall him calling you about this at all. Is that correct? A fair statement? Not about the repair, correct. Now, do you specifically recall when it was that you first heard from Mr. Bartek that there was something broke at his house and you had to go fix it? No, I don't recall the exact day. Was it your custom and practice if he called you, say, during the week, that you'd try to get the work done within the same week? Yes, it depends on what priority it was, time of year, whether the pool's being used, what the repair is. Summertime. Is that a high priority for pools? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So in the summertime, if you got such a call from Mr. Bartek, you would try to do the repair within just a couple of hours. Yes, 2 or 3 days. I'm sorry, just a couple of days. Yes, 2 or 3 days. I'm going to ask you what we call a hypothetical question, Mr. Walker. It's a what if question. What if Mr. Bartek initially told you that this spa needed repair work on August 9th? Do you think that you would have repaired it before the 19th? Yes. Now, she's trying to impeach him because he's saying that he was there the day before the homicides, but he doesn't have any records to show what day he was there, but it would seem as though, according to the defense, he might have been there a lot sooner than the 19th. If it was the 9th, he probably was there in 2 or 3 days, like he just testified to. So if they called on the 9th, if the family called and asked for the repair work on August 9th, then it would be fair to say he would be there 9th, 10th, 11th, maybe even the 12th, but most likely not the 19th. Now, am I correct, Mr. Walker, in stating that on the day that you went to this home repair, the spa override switch, that was the very first time that you had been to this home? Yes, it was. And you had never seen any of these people before? No. That's not right, or that is right. No, I have never seen these people before that day. And you've indicated that the people that you believe were Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were sitting at a table. Correct. And did either of them ever get up from that table? I did not see them get up, no. Were they doing anything at that table? Eating, drinking, writing, playing cards, anything? I do not recall that. Could have been doing some of those things, you just don't remember. I remember. I do not recall them doing anything, no. Was there a radio or a television out in the backyard that you saw? No, I did not see that. And they were sitting at what sort of table? Outdoor patio type table, round. And they were sitting on chairs? Yes. Outdoor type chairs? I believe so, yes. And what, if anything, were they saying to each other? I did not hear them talk to each other. So they were silent? Objection, misstates the testimony. I don't know, the witness says, I don't know if they were silent, but I did not hear them when I was walking by that. The court says, objection overruled. The answer will stand. Well, you just cut him off. You didn't finish. Ms. Abramson says, is it correct to say that there were times when you could have been talking and you were just too far away to hear them? Yes. Objection calls for speculation. Sustained. Were there times when you were out of range of normal conversation from that table? Yes. And is it also correct to say, Mr. Walker, that the one person who was always farthest away from you, whom you have described as being at that location, was the person who you described to the police as the tennis instructor? Yes. And you did, in fact, when you first spoke to the police, describe 5 people being at the location, correct? Correct, yes. Mr. and Mrs. Menendez, correct? Correct. Erik and Lyle, yes. And the tennis instructor, yes. So now he is saying that it's the tennis instructor. And when you first discussed this with Detective Zoller, the gentleman who's sitting right here, you didn't tell him. Now, I don't know the names of the sons, did you? No, I didn't. In fact, you referred to them as Erik and Lyle. Yes, I did. Specifically by name. Yes. And in fact, what you said to Detective Zoller was, objection, this is hearsay, overruled. What you said to Detective Zoller was that it was Erik who was playing tennis, correct? Yes. And you described to Detective Zoller that Erik was ranting and raving over a missed shot? Yes. What does ranting, those are your words, ranting and raving, or were those Detective Zoller's words? They're my words. So, what does ranting and raving mean? To me, it means anger. Anger over a missed shot? Yes. Do you know who John McEnroe is? I've heard of that name. Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Have you ever seen any of the people that you've observed playing tennis get angry with themselves over screwing up? I don't believe so, really. You don't think? I haven't seen that much, so I'm the wrong person to ask. Well, good. At least you're honest about something there. Okay, so you're really not experienced with how people deal with, no, missing shots or anything like that. No, I'm not. In fact, did you use the words missed shot when you were talking to Detective Zoller? Yes, I did. And what did you mean by a missed shot? You mean the ball went flying by and they just swung and it didn't hit? Not knowing tennis, that was the only thing I could think of to describe the situation. So you didn't mean just when a ball would go by and he wouldn't get it. Anything that would go wrong because I don't know the proper terms. So if the shot wasn't hit properly, it could be any of those. If it didn't go far enough, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Didn't have the right spin on it, you have no idea what it was. No. But it seemed directly connected to performance in the game. Yes, that's what I meant. Now you're saying that the person who was ranting and raving was Lyle Menendez. Yes, I had the wrong names of the wrong people. And where did you get the names from? I got them from the radio. So you listened to the radio about the case, correct? I listened to radio about everything. But about this case, you heard about this case on the radio. Yes. And did you listen to radio talk shows about this case? Yes. And in fact, Mr. Walker, you called in to a radio talk show about this case, didn't you? Bam, mic drop. I love Leslie Abramson. He says, yes, I did. This guy just wants attention. You had a chat with Michael Jackson? Yes, I did. On the air. Yes, I did. And that was after you had your interview of July 25th of 1993 with Detective Zoller. Yes. And in fact, as of July 25th, 1993, when you had your chat with Detective Zoller, you were living with your wife, who was quite a fan of court TV, wasn't she? So his wife is a true crime nut, like all of us are, but I mean, she's a true crime nut watching court TV and talking to her husband about the case, I'm sure. Ms. Harris says, objection as to anything having to do with the wife speculation. The court says sustained as to that question. It's irrelevant. Did your wife discuss the Menendez trial with you before you talked to the police? Yes. And was your wife watching this trial on court TV in July of 1993? Objection, lack of foundation, sustained. Well, you got court television in your home, didn't you? Yes, I did. Your wife would discuss with you what she had seen on court television, wouldn't she? Yes. And you even saw parts of this trial on court television. Yes, I did. So you watched it at least 12 times, you told us, correct? Wow, approximately. And you are aware that while this case was being televised, court TV, would not only show it every day, they'd also review it on the weekends. Well, yes, I guess so. Objection, Your Honor. Motion to strike, no personal knowledge. Objection sustained. The answer is stricken. The jury is admonished to disregard it. Did you ever see court TV coverage of the case on the weekends? I don't recall. Now, you don't work on Sunday, correct? Correct. Do you, from time to time, watch television on Sunday? Yes. Did you watch television on Sundays in July of 1993? I'm sure I did. But even though you had seen this case on television when you went and talked to Detective Zoller, you still misidentified Erik and Lyle, according to you. Is that correct? So he had been seeing them on TV, he'd been hearing about them on the radio, and yet he still got them wrong. He misidentified them. And this was before uh, going and talking to Detective Zoller. He says, I misidentified them until I saw the pictures. Well, you saw them on television. Yes, that's when I corrected it and corrected it with Miss Erdelay, your investigator. Well, you saw them on television before July 25th. No, I did not. No, I did not. When did the trial start, Mr. Walker? I have no idea. You would know that. I do not. In fact, Mr. Walker, you've told us that as soon as you heard about Mr. and Mrs. Menendez's loss of their lives, you remembered that you had seen the whole family, correct? Yes. And this was, do you remember seeing the television coverage of the police at the house? I never watch television news. You never watch television news? And I do not read the paper. I get the information. It's depressing enough without hearing it on the radio. Uh, it's depressing enough with hearing it on the radio without having to watch the news. Ms. Harris says, I'd like to object. The witness says, I do not watch television. Sustained, the answer is stricken. Why? Ms. Abramson says, Mr. Walker, you never watch television news? Objection asked and answered. Overruled. Your answer will stand. Ms. Abramson says, did you ever watch television news between August 20th, 1989 and July 25th, 1993? I get my information from radio. Is that a no? No. Yes. And you're saying never between August 21st, 1989 and July 25th, 1993, that's a lot of years, did you ever see a picture of the Menendez brothers? No, I did not. I think someone's lying here. I can't be sure, but that's really hard to believe. Really, really hard to believe after 4 years of news coverage of the Menendez case, and they were about to go to trial, and you never saw them, but yet you know them. You were at their home. Okay. And we don't even have paperwork to prove that you were there, but okay. Continuing on. But that didn't stop you from naming them to Detective Zoller, correct? Objection, argumentative. Overruled. I named them from the radio. That's where I got the names from. All right, let's explore that. You heard there were two of them on the radio, correct? Yes. One was called Erik Menendez, correct? Correct. And one was called Lyle Menendez, correct? Correct. And that was made, and what made you decide that Erik was the name of the person that you had seen playing tennis that day? Because they referred to the older and the younger brother. Erik looked older to me. Therefore, I got the names wrong. When did Erik look older to you? When I saw him. When you saw him at the home, Erik appeared to be the older brother? Yes. And did you believe it was, well, what made you think that it was the older brother who was doing the ranting and raving? I told you because Erik looked older. Yes, but now you're telling us it wasn't Erik. You're telling us now it was Lyle. Busted! She totally busted him. Yeah, he says that's what I'm saying. I had the names wrong. That's how I got it wrong because of the ages. If I had had the ages right, I could have had it correct. Well, but at the time that you were there, what did you notice that made you think it was the older or the younger or the Erik or the Lyle or either one? Just from appearance. All right, from appearance on that day, what did you see that distinguished them from each other? That Erik looked older, so therefore I gave him the name Lyle because that's how they described it on the radio. Erik looked older, so you gave him the name Lyle. Because on the radio they say the older brother was Lyle, so if I think Erik is older, I'm going to give him the wrong name, aren't I? And that's what I did. But you're saying the older brother, the one who looked older, was the one ranting and raving. So that makes no sense. Because it would be the opposite then. So what does the older or younger have to do with him, with what you saw that day? It's got to go to do with what I saw. It just shows you how I got the names confused. On the radio, they said Erik was the younger brother, correct? Yes. And they said Lyle was the older. But since Erik looked older to me, and then I gave him that name. And when your investigator, slow down, Mr. Walker, you're not answering the question and you're going to get confused. I'm not confused. You're saying that Erik looked older when? When I saw him on the tennis court. But you're telling us August 19th. You're telling us you didn't see Erik on the tennis court. I'm going to object as argumentative. I did see him. Rephrase the question. Let's back up. Somebody was playing tennis who with you who with who? Somebody was playing tennis with who you thought was the tennis instructor. Yes. In court today, you say it's Lyle. Yes. When you were describing this person to Detective Zoller, though, you didn't give a physical description, you simply gave a name. Correct. And the name you gave was Erik. Correct. Now, when you're saying that you never saw either Erik or Lyle again, nor a picture of them until after you spoke to Detective Zoller on July 25th, 1993. That's right. And then what picture did you see or where did you see it? It was on court TV. So then only after that did you see them on court TV? That's the first time that you saw them again. That I saw them again? That's the first time you saw them again. That's his answer. I don't know. That I'm just reading what's on the page. It's a confusing answer. Next question is, and what were you doing on court TV? Objection, irrelevant. So he was on court TV? Oh no, it was on court TV where he saw the picture. So then only after that did you see them on court TV He says, and that's the first time you saw them again. That makes no sense. And then she asks again, Ms. Abramson asks, and what were you doing on court TV? What were they doing on court TV? Sorry. Objection, irrelevant, overruled. You may answer the question. The witness says they were in court. So he was watching them on trial, or at least segments of portions of his trial or their trials. Ms. Abramson says, in court like they are right now at this table? Correct. How did you know which was which? Because during court TV, they did mention names and people who were on the stand mentioned names. They mentioned names? Yeah, I didn't figure it out the first time I saw court TV. It took a couple days before I finally figured out who was who. So you had to watch for a few days before you figured out who was who? Yes. Did you see Erik or Lyle on the witness stand? No, I did not. And when, in the course of watching court TV, someone described Erik or Lyle that told you that you had been mistaken when you mentioned that it was Erik to Detective Zoller. Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object, misstates the evidence, sustained. Ms. Abramson says, that told you you were mistaken when you told Detective Zoller that Erik was the one playing tennis and ranting and raving over missed shots. Objection, misstates the evidence, overruled. Will you ask the question again, please? Yes. After this, how many days it took for you to realize who was Erik and who was Lyle? Okay, you realized you had misidentified someone to Detective Zoller. Yes, I did. That's why I straightened it out with Ms. Erdelay, your investigator. Ms. Erdelay doesn't work for objection, argumentative, overruled. The witness says, that's why I told you. Ms. Amerson says, you understand that she doesn't work for Detective Zoller? Yes. Detective Zoller works for the city of Beverly Hills. I understand the difference. So I take it that after you realized your mistake and after you spoke to Ms. Erdelay, you called Detective Zoller and told him you made a mistake. I don't recall. You didn't, did you? I don't recall making that call, no. So you didn't make it. That's why you don't recall it. Is that correct? I don't recall calling him about that, no. And how long after you made your statement to Detective Zoller where you misidentified the Menendez brothers did you straighten it out with Ms. Erdelay? I told Miss Erdelay the first time I saw her. And when was that? I don't remember the exact date. First time she interviewed me. And you don't remember when that was? I do not remember the exact date. No. Was it a day after you talked to Detective Zoller? No, it was several weeks. Several weeks? I would imagine. I don't know the date. Sorry. Now let's go back to the day when you were at the Menendez home. What was Mrs. Menendez wearing? I do not recall. Do you recall the type of clothing? Best of my recollection, it was casual. Casual shorts, casual skirt, casual pants. I do not recall. What about Mr. Menendez was he wearing? What about Mr. Menendez? What was he wearing? I do not recall. A suit? No, he was not wearing a suit. Shorts? I do not recall. Did he have a hat on? No, he did not. Did Mrs. Menendez have a hat on? Not that I recall. So this was 2 in the afternoon in August, correct? Correct. And is there anything that covers that area that on the diagram appears to be between the pool, the guest house, and the tennis court? That area there, is there anything covering that? No. So it's open. Yes, it is. And is there any covering over the top of the tennis court? No, there is not. Is there fencing on any side of the tennis court? I believe as best I can recall, there's fencing all the way around except for an open portion. And is there canvas that covers the fencing on any portion of the tennis court? Yes. And can you show us sides of the tennis court the fencing is covered over with canvas? Do you want me to use a pointer? Yeah, that would be best. Do you still have it? I have 2 of them. If you wanted a poker, you could use that too. As I recall, it was approximately like this, something like this, and then there was a section open through here. And all the parts that weren't open was the fencing with canvas, correct? As best of my recollection, yes. And the open part was just open. You could just walk off that path or walk off that paved area right onto the court, correct? Well, yeah, through here. There's a section through here that's open. Okay, so there's just a section that's open, but everywhere else there's fence. As far as I can recall, yes. So what you recall of the fence is covered with canvas. Yes. So you can't really see anybody on that tennis court unless you're near that open area? Correct. Really? So how are you seeing him and nearing him, and how is he yelling at his parents if they can't even see one another? Okay. So when you're working at the house, if I may approach, Your Honor, the court says yes. May I borrow your pointer, Mr. Walker? The witness says, yes, you may. Ms. Abramson says, thank you. So when you're here where the controls are, you can't see anybody on the tennis court. No, you cannot. When you're here where the spa is, you can't see anybody on the tennis court. I believe not. And if you're here, you still can't see anybody on the tennis court. No, you cannot. Only when you get up to the opening can you see people on the tennis court. Correct. And there was one person here on the east side of the court. Right. And one person on the west side. Correct. And then once you get past there, you're heading this way, correct? Yeah. And you're there, you don't see anybody on the tennis court? No. And then you start coming back and you can't see anything until you get to that opening. Right, correct. And you cannot only not see the people, you certainly can't see what they're looking at. No, just for that short period. And is it your recollection that during the 30 to 40 minutes that you were at this location, the tennis instructor never said anything? I didn't, well, he may have said something. I don't recall what he said. I mean, there was conversation the whole time I was there as you walked by. So if the tennis instructor were giving instructions, you didn't hear them. No, I did not hear any instructions. Now, you've described here today the tennis instructor as being a young man. Yes. But older than Menendez. Yes, brothers. Correct? Yes, I believe so. Well, you believed so when you first. Well, I'm not good at ages, so I can't tell you exactly what age he was. I mean, I've already proved that. But you told us that you're pretty good at older and younger, correct? I've already proved I'm not good at ages. So you've always described him as an older man that Eric or Lyle, than Eric or blah, 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 blah. Start over. So you've always described him as an older man than Eric or Lyle Menendez, correct? Yes. Did he appear to be a younger man than Mr. and Mrs. Menendez? Yes. So he was somewhere between those two groups. Yes. And what was he wearing? I do not recall what he was wearing. I didn't see him very often. As you pointed out when you walk by, if he's on that side of the court, you only get a glimpse of him as you walk by. Wouldn't you agree, as I just pointed out, you would only get a glimpse of both people as you walk by? You would only get, it's like you pointed out, the only time you're going to get a glimpse is from about here to here. Right, so anybody on the tennis court of the people, yeah. So what was Lyle Menendez wearing? A white tennis outfit. All white? All white. Just like in the movies. Just like in the movies. And what was Eric Menendez wearing? The same. Now, if I understand you, for the 30 or 40 minutes that you were there, you never saw Eric Menendez play tennis. No, I did not. Um, Before I forget, I want to interject too that it's important to impeach him and to um kind of prove that he's wrong about the date too, because Eric and Lyle said that on that whole weekend that it was leading up to the homicides, that they were very scared that their parents were going to do something to them, and they thought that it was best to separate and to stay away from the house. Like one would stay away from the house all day, while the other one would stay back behind to like keep an eye on things. And I don't know why they thought that was like the safest way, but that's what they were doing. So for them all to be out there playing tennis in the morning, that kind of goes against the whole, Lyle left for the entire day kind of theory. So I just wanted to throw that in your heads before I forgot that thought because I was going to bring it up before and then I totally blanked. So only one young man and one instructor played tennis. Correct. Now, did you state to Detective Zoller, by the way, when you talked to Detective Zoller, was it at the Beverly Hills Police Department? No, it was not. It was at my home. Did he come there at a prearranged time? Yes, he did. Was he by himself or was there anyone with him? He was by himself. And when he was talking to you, did you see him writing down notes? Yes. On a piece of paper, say this size? I believe so. It was that size. Yes, approximately. Mr. Harris says, for the record, Your Honor, a piece of average paper 8 by 11. Ms. Abramson repeats 8 by 11. And on that occasion, on July 25th, 1993, did you tell Detective Zoller that as you started to work, you observed the boys, Eric and Lyle, on the tennis court with the tennis coach? Did you tell him that? Yes. Did you say that as the boys were playing tennis, the parents, mostly the mother, would comment about a missed tennis shot that either boy would make? Yes. Now that's not what you've testified to here, correct? But my ignorance of tennis would lead me to say that because if I see two people in tennis outfits with rackets, I would say that they were playing tennis. So even if one of them is in a wheelchair, not if one was in a wheelchair. Objection, irrelevant. Ms. Nahara says, even if one is not playing tennis, because I don't know tennis, that's how I would describe it. You know the difference between 1 and 2, do you not, Mr. Walker? If I don't, I'm sure you'll tell me. Wow, he's okay. You do know the difference, yes, between one person and two people. Yes, I do. Doing something, but I don't know tennis. So what I'm trying to say to you is if I see two men as a layman, if I see two people with tennis rackets and outfits, I would say that they're playing tennis, even though I didn't observe them. So even though one is standing there by the court or standing next to the parents at a table, correct? I would assume they were playing tennis. So you assume that Eric Menendez, who you now testified was standing next to the table, he was playing tennis. Is that correct? Is that right? Either that or getting ready to, yes. If he's got a tennis racket and he's got a tennis outfit, I would assume that. And you, I believe, have indicated both in your original drawing, which was Exhibit 361 in the first trial, right. Ms. Aronson says, Ms. Nahara, what is the number now? The court says 115. Ms. Nahara says 115. Thank you, Your Honor. All right. You put Eric Menendez either next to the table, which I take it is this circle on the diagram you made. Correct. Or slightly over the line of the tennis court, correct? Well, he would be right here is where you put him, right? Right. That's only one time, but he would be, like I say, near here or further on the court. Well, you marked the E for, but I can't. He doesn't even let her finish questions. We can't do it simultaneously or it makes this young woman crazy, she says. I won't make her crazy. They're talking about the stenographer. Stop talking over me. Let me try to ask a question and I'll give you the chance to answer. When during the last trial you placed the E on the diagram, did the E stand for Eric Menendez? Yes. And when you placed the E on the diagram, did you notice that you had put it inside the line of the tennis court? Yes. And you have testified here today that you saw Erik in two positions now. Yes. One, right next to the table, which you say was about here, and another time slightly inside the court. Correct. Now, do you know what this broken line here is supposed to represent? I had to assume the net of the tennis court. Is it your understanding that people playing tennis stand adjacent to the net? I do not know. So you never saw Eric Menendez. You've never seen people play tennis before? So you never saw Eric Menendez move the racket in a direction of a moving ball, did you? No, I did not. And is it your understanding, however primitive, shall we say, of tennis, that it's a game that involves the hitting of a ball with a racket? Yes. So it's not like soccer where you could kick the ball too, correct? I know that, yes. Now, am I correct, Mr. Walker, in stating that all that sticks out in your mind about language are the dirty words from what you heard that day? Well, those are the only words I remember, yes. Are dirty words. Yes. So you don't know what the sentence was leading up to the dirty word, is that correct? That's correct. Is that believable? No. No, it's not believable at all because you would remember like the sentence or the context in which it was used in that sentence. But he can't even give them that. So this guy's full of garbage. I think he's a fame seeker, and I think he wanted to interject himself into this case and was happily willing to testify against the brothers and to give basically non-evidence, non-evidentiary information to police. So you don't know what the sentence was following after the dirty word. No, I know it was tennis related, but I do not know the phrase. So tennis related, such as, God, I effed up that baseline shot. Similar to that, yes. Or tennis related, like, I'm a shitty tennis player. Well, like I said, it was tennis related. Right, those are two examples of what you could have heard. It's possible. Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object and make a motion to strike both the question and the answer as no foundation. The court says the objection is sustained to the answer as calling for speculation. The jury is admonished to disregard it. Ms. Abramson says, now you have no recollection of what the specific context of those dirty words were. Is that correct? No, like I said, it was to do with the tennis game. So you're sticking to the tennis game. So how is that directed at the parents? Like, you can't have it both ways, buddy. All right, but you don't know if the person was cussing at himself over the way he was playing tennis? He may have, but it was directed in the direction of the parents. Sure. So he was making the remark towards his parents. Correct. I am a shitty tennis player, Mom. Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object to the question, Your Honor, as to foundation. That was the question. The court says sustained, objection sustained. I think it's a great question. And she's getting them thinking. She's getting the jury thinking about it. Like, why is this guy really testifying? Ms. Amerson says, I'd like that as an example. You heard what I just said, Mr. Walker. Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object as irrelevant. The court says, let's hear the question. Ms. Abramson says, thank you. Based on what you remember, the fact that you remember so little could have been the type of statements that you were overhearing. It was tennis related, anger and tennis related. Yes. So now you never heard either Mr. or Mrs. Menendez say, don't talk to me like that, did you? No, I did not. You didn't hear Mr. Menendez say, why are you cursing at your mother? No, I did not. You didn't hear Mrs. Menendez say, don't speak to your father that way, dear, did you? No. In fact, neither of them seemed to react to these words that you found so upsetting. Isn't that correct? That's correct. And that's what I said. Like, they're not even going to react to that. Don't you think Jose would be like, don't swear at your mother and smack him across the head? Like, he would not, well, or whatever, some kind of physical violent punishment. And Mrs. Menendez was also violent and threw things, got angry, like irrationally angry out of nowhere. So it's not like they would just sit idly by and let their sons, who they're used to abusing, uh, talk to them in a disrespectful way, I'm assuming. And you didn't hear the tennis instructor say, boys, boys, now don't speak that way to your parents or anything like that, did you? I don't recall him ever saying anything, whoever he was. Well, now you want to say he's not the tennis coach, is that correct? No, I'm saying objection, argumentative. The court says, wait, wait. Objection sustained to the form of the question. The answer is stricken. Ms. Abramson says, all right, Mr. Walker, after the day of July 25th, 1993, when you first gave your statement to Detective Zoller, did you learn that indeed there was a tennis coach who worked for the Menendez family? Yes. And did you learn that that tennis coach denies that he was at the house on Saturday when you claim that you saw a tennis coach there? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. Well, Your Honor, I'm not offering it for the truth. I'm offering it for whether it affected the witness's state of mind. The court says, rephrase the question then. Ms. Amerson says, was it brought to your attention that the only tennis coach who worked for the Menendez family at this time was the, wait, was it brought to your attention that the only tennis coach who worked for the Menendez family at this time, and then the court interrupts and says, just ask him in the general sense, did he ever hear any conversations regarding a tennis coach being there at that time? All right. Ms. Abramson continues. Did anyone talk to you about what the tennis coach was going to say about being there? No. So no one ever mentioned that to you? No. Did anyone ever mention to you that the tennis coach that worked for the Menendez family had blonde hair? No, not that I recall. So, did you ever see tennis coach Mark Heffernan testify in this case on court TV? Yes, I have. Did you hear him testifying about this Saturday when you claim that you saw a tennis coach at that home? No, I didn't. I didn't see that part. Now, the court says, was he the person you saw there that day? Witness says, no, he was not. Ms. Abramson says, even if that's the only tennis coach that they knew, your position is he wasn't the one you saw. Your Honor, Ms. Nahara says, Your Honor, I'm going to object to counsel testifying overruled. The witness says he was not the one. Now, do you recall telling Ms. Erdely that you would never be able to identify the tennis coach who was there that day because you didn't see him well enough? I probably couldn't. Is that what you told her? Yes, could be. I don't recall what I told her, but so if you couldn't recognize him, Mr. Walker, I could probably not recognize him from the time that I was there. I have not seen anybody like him. I don't, so I don't know. So you couldn't say someone is him, and you can't say someone isn't him, correct? I've never been shown anybody to compare. What about Mr. Heffernan? You told the judge right now that wasn't him. I know that. So why do you know that? He had blonde hair. He had blonde hair. So it's the color of the hair that's the difference, is that right? That's one of the differences, yes. What's the other difference? Blonde hair and dark hair is a big difference. So what's the other difference? I don't recall the other difference, but that's the main difference. That's what excludes him. So that is the only difference, correct? Yes, that's the one that excludes him if the hair is the hair color. So do you remember telling me, or sorry, do you remember telling Mrs. Erdele that from the position the tennis coach or the tennis instructor was on the court, he was in shadow most of the time? It wasn't that he was in shadow as much as the fact that it was covered more on the end of the court, so you could only get a small glimpse of him as you were walking by for a short period. But apart from a glimpse, did you tell Ms. Erdele that that man, the tennis coach, was in the shadow and therefore his hair could have appeared darker than in fact it was. No, he was not in shadow. So you deny saying that to her? No, there's no shadows in that area at that time of day. It's the covering that blocked the view. How much longer do you think you'll be? A few more minutes, Your Honor. The court says, oh wait, no, that has to be Ms. Abramson. And the court says, is there going to be redirect? Ms. Nahara says, yes. The court says, are you going to have any examination? Mr. Gessler says, probably not, but still working. The court says, okay, all right, let's take our recess. We'll resume at 20 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions, blah, 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 blah. So the court says we'll have the jury come out. The jury is back. You may continue your cross-examination. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Walker, you told us that a few days ago, after this visit to the Menendez home, you called the Beverly Hills Police Department. Yes, that's correct. And what day was that? Do you remember? I would say approximately Wednesday. And this is the Wednesday after these two folks had lost their lives in their home? Correct. And you were hearing about that on the radio, weren't you? Yes, I was. And who did you talk to at the police department? I called their regular line. I do not know who I talked to. Whoever answered the phone is the person that you talked to, or did they refer you to someone else? No, just the person that answered the phone. So when the person was on the phone on the other end, did you say, I want to talk to you about these Menendez people who just lost their lives? What I said was, I said I was the service repairman the day before the homicides, and I told them what business I was in, and he said, so? It was he? Yes. And he said, so like a so what? Right. And then what did you say? That was the end of the conversation. Oh, didn't you then say that you saw something that could be significant? No, I didn't say that. But you testified to that. I remember testifying to that. I never said that. Ms. Abramson says, okay, well, give me a minute. So he lied in his original testimony or misstated something? She says, excuse me, I'm sorry, I have to look it up. She comes back and says, I have to find another reference, Your Honor. There are two of them. I apologize for the delay. I'm sorry, I'm not finding it. I'll look for it. So you're saying I'm the pool repairman. I was there the day before, and the man said so, right? Or he says right. And you couldn't recall testifying here previously, but I saw something I think is significant, and the man said so again. I do not recall saying that. Do you recall whether you gave the man your name? I did not give him my name. Do you recall whether the man said somebody would get back to you? No, he never said that. Do you recall telling Ms. Erdelay that you had given the man your name and your phone number? No, I never said that to Ms. Erdelay. So, okay, whatever. So now when it's so I think it's so easy to spot the non-credible witnesses through cross-examination. That's where you really get your interesting commentary from some of these witnesses that aren't so credible. So he says he never said that to Ms. Erdelay. Now, when Ms. Erdelay interviewed you, was she doing the same thing Detective Zoller did, taking notes? Yes, she did. And so, you spoke to her on several occasions, correct? Yes, I did. And was she pleasant when she spoke to you? Yes, she was very pleasant. And did she give you a chance to explain what you were saying? Yes, she asked me questions and I answered them to the best of my ability, yes. Now I want to talk to you about if you can remember when you first came up to the house on that day that you were there. You say that you approached Mr. and Mrs. Menendez to identify yourself. Is that right? Yes. And you asked them, would it be convenient if I were to repair the pool now? Yes. And this was at approximately 2 in the afternoon, approximately. And you had already serviced 3 pools on Lucerne Avenue in Hancock Park before you ever got there. To the best of my knowledge, yes. And was one of the people those whose pool you serviced that day? Well, strike that. At the last trial, did you indicate that the names of the 3 families whose pool you serviced that morning? Yes, I did. And was one of those names Ms. Ann Ingram? Yes, it was. And was Ms. Ingram's pool the last pool you serviced that morning, the first or the one in the middle? In the middle, he says, she was not my customer on that date. But you told us in the first trial that she was. Well, I thought she was. Marianne McCall was the proper name. What do you mean, proper name? So that's a different person? All right, so let's stay with Ms. Ingram for a moment, okay? Okay. In the last trial, when you told us that you had gone to the Elm Drive home after servicing 3 pools in Hancock Park, you named the 3 families, correct? Yes, I did. And one of the names you gave was Ann Ingram. Yes, I did. I take it you're aware of the fact that Ms. Ingram came in and testified. Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object to anything someone else testified to as hearsay. The court says, sustained. How is it sustained if, okay. All right, Ms. Abrams, and like, some of these rules and some of these, I don't know the law, and I don't know why things get sustained sometimes, and it's just ridiculous. Like, why wouldn't that be allowed to come in? But whatever. All right, so Ms. Abramson says, all right, you've now testified she wasn't your customer. Did you know that because she testified that way? Yes. Yes? I thought she was my customer on that date. She wasn't. I was mistaken. It was another customer. Bingo. You got him on the record to say that he's not great with his memory. He's not so credible. He shouldn't be trusted so much. And he's been also caught in several misstatements that he made. But she was your customer as of the time that you testified, correct? Yes, she was. Now, you've told us, Mr. Walker, that you're not good on ages, correct? Yes. Are you also not good on dates? I'm pretty good on dates. Pretty good? Now, let's talk about whatever day it was that you were at the Menendez home. When you asked Mrs. or Mr. Menendez if it was okay to service their pool, did they say anything about fine, but they had to leave in an hour? Because remember, they were supposed to be going on a fishing trip. This is the same day as the infamous fishing trip where Lyle and Erik were supposed to go on this shark fishing trip where it's some business thing that was arranged for Jose where he could start learning shark hunting or shark fishing, whatever. I don't even know the right term, but they went on this boat to do this, and the brothers thought that this was the opportunity that the parents were looking for to get rid of them that weekend. So they thought that their lives were going to end on that boat ride, and they were terrified the whole time. They stayed in the front, they stayed separate from their parents because their strategy was to stay away from their parents for the majority of that boat ride. They also were out that day, all day, Saturday, if you recall, because they didn't want to go on this trip because they were in fear of their lives for what Jose might do to them on this trip. So, or on this boat ride. So they were late, but yet they still went. So they were out doing things and running errands and buying shotguns. So they weren't home playing tennis on the 19th. Just FYI. All right, so when you asked Mr. and Mrs. Menendez if it was okay to service their pool, did they say anything about fine, but they had to leave in an hour? Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object as argumentative as to whatever day it was. Overruled. Witness says, no, they did not. Did you ever see any of the people at the home packing an ice chest to take on a fishing trip? No, I did not. Did you ever hear any of them mention that they had an appointment to take a fishing boat that afternoon? No mention, no, no mention, no. So you heard nothing about fishing? No, I did not. And you saw no preparation being made by anybody to leave? No, I did not. Did you go around the front of the house before you pulled to the back? No, I did not. So you don't know. Did you see any cars in the back? No, there were no cars. And did you park your truck? Do you do drive a truck? Yes, I do. You've seen it. In the back alley, I have seen it. Yes. You were driving by one day when I was walking on a street in Los Angeles on a Saturday in Hancock around noon. Right. And you were driving the truck that you had at the time. Yes. You weren't on your way to Elm Drive that day? No, I was not. I didn't think so. Okay. So now you parked your truck in the back alley. She's trying to prove like those aren't the people that you always see on Saturdays. That was brilliant. All right. She says, now you parked your truck in the back alley. Yes. Correct. Yes, I did. Did you park in front of the garage doors that were back there? Yes. And you know there were garage doors back there. As far as I remember, yes. Did you park behind the garage doors for that location, 722? Yes. Now, you were aware before July 25th, well, strike that. At some point after the Wednesday when you called the police department and before the day that your wife went to the police department in 1993, you were aware of the fact that Erik and Lyle Menendez were arrested for this? Yes. So you heard about that? Yes. And before you spoke to the police to Detective Zoller on July 25th, 1993, you even generally knew what their defense was, didn't you? Basically, yes. I have nothing further. Mr. Levin says, Leslie, oh, wait, maybe I do. Excuse me. And then she comes back and says, that's not what I was looking for. It's another one I'm looking for. Another one. Thank you. I'm sorry. The court says, all right. Thank you, Mr. Gessler. No cross, Your Honor. So there is going to be a little bit of redirect from Ms. Nahara. Mr. Walker, I want to clear up something, if I may. Ms. Abramson says, objection, Your Honor. You said that you saw overruled. You said what is she objecting to? You said that maybe to the phrasing of clear something up because that's probably not proper to say I want to clear something up like the making some kind of insinuation that the defense left something murky or something. You know what I'm saying? So I think maybe that's she's just objecting to the phraseology there. Ms. Nair says, you said that you saw a person on the tennis courts with the defendant, Lyle Menendez. Were they playing tennis? Yes, they were. Now, this person, you referred to him to Detective Zoller as a tennis instructor. Is that right? I assumed he was, yes. So when you say you assumed he was, did anyone ever introduce him as a tennis instructor? No. When he was on the court, did he say anything? I do not recall him saying anything, no. Did he ever yell out instructions or anything like that? I don't recall him saying anything. So as you sit there now, do you have any evidence or facts that he was in fact a tennis instructor? No, I do not. Now, on cross examination, Ms. Abramson asked you a question about a statement that you made in the police report to Detective Zoller, and in the police report to Detective Zoller, do you recall telling Detective Zoller that Erik was ranting and raving over a missed shot? You noticed him, and immediately he stopped ranting and raving and said, "Hi, how are you?" to him. Yes, I said that to Detective Zoller, yes. Is that what you observed an individual doing out there? Yes. So they're trying to make him like sound some crazy person, but he can also like stop on a dime and be like, "Hi, normal," like, "Hey, how you doing?" What? How is that? He's angry at his sport, at the way he's playing his sport is how I take that, and there's nothing nefarious about what happened here. Now, as you sit here, Was it Eric Menendez or Lyle Menendez? It was Lyle. And did you also tell Detective Zoller the thing that you remembered most, that the boys were so belligerent? Ms. Abramson says, I'm going to object to that, Your Honor. No foundation. Overruled. Again, it just, yeah, sure, let the state do whatever they want. There's no rules for them. But when the state objects to the defense's line of questioning, the court often rules in their favor. All right. Ms. Nahara says, and could you describe to us what you meant by belligerent? Well, just seemed to be disrespectful to their parents. And when you say disrespectful to their parents, could you tell us exactly what it is that you observed that made you say that they were disrespectful to their parents? When they were angry, it seemed like they were directing their anger towards their parents. And what specifically did you see? Well, that's what I saw. I saw when they did get angry, it seemed like they were angry towards their parents. This is all speculation. None of this should have come in. Like, none of it. And the judge should have excluded this person, this witness. And did you tell me recently what it was that you thought was disrespectful to their parents? Ms. Abrams says, I'm going to object to the did you tell me recently. The court sustains that. When you say that they were disrespectful, was this because you saw their mother give them advice? Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to object as leading and suggestive. Sustained. Objection sustained. Can you tell me exactly what it is you saw? That has been asked and answered, Your Honor, and did not go into it in cross-examination. The court says, well, you did, but the question is, what are you asking? Ms. Nahara says, I am asking him, what did you see that led you, what specifically did you observe that led you to believe they were being disrespectful to their parents? Ms. Abramson says, asked and answered, overruled. The witness says, just from the interaction, it seems like the parents were, or the mother, I should say, seemed to be giving advice as far as tennis, and they got angry that they would get angry back. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm going to object. Motion to strike a speculation on the part of the witness. It seemed. Overruled. The answer will stand. This frickin' judge. Breathe. Gotta remember, inhale, exhale. I can't stand Judge Weisberg. I think he's a corrupt. I don't know if I want to say corrupt, but I definitely think he's biased. Maybe not to the level of corrupt yet. I haven't seen it. Unless he might have been doing some nefarious stuff. I don't know. And I don't want to like disparage the guy, but this was right after, like I said, Rodney King was going on and OJ Simpson had just happened. He wasn't the judge in OJ Simpson. He was the judge in the Rodney King stuff. And it was a very crazy time socially. And it's very possible that the judge could have tried to force a conviction somehow by his rulings and things. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. Ms. Nahara says, and you told Ms. Abramson that you heard the defendant, Lyle Menendez, using certain cuss words. Is that right? Correct. And he said something like, could he have been saying something like, F, I missed a shot? Do you recall her asking you about that? Yes. And could he just as easily have been saying, F, Mom, stop trying to help? Possible, yes. Ms. Nahara says, thank you. I have nothing further. And we have a short recross examination by Ms. Abramson. What words of advice did Mrs. Menendez have for her tennis playing son? I don't know. I don't recall. So you don't even know if she was giving advice or giving criticism? No. You don't know, in fact, what she was doing. She could have said, nice shot, Lyle. No, Mom, I effed up. You don't know if that was the exchange either, do you? I do not know the exchange dialogue. Yes. Nothing further. Anything else? We're going to redirect again. So she didn't like that answer. So Ms. Nahara gets up again. She asks, although you don't know the exact dialogue, your testimony is, as you observed it, the defendant was angry towards his parents. Is that right? Yes. Thank you. Court says, all right. On that question, do you have any recross? Ms. Abramson says, yes. For the recross examination. And she asks, what do you mean towards? That they turned and looked in her direction? Correct. There's all you mean, there's all you mean, isn't it? Yes, nothing further. I think she means that's all you mean, isn't it? And Mr. Gessler says, I have a couple of questions. That same issue, Your Honor. The court says, okay, yay, we get to hear from Mr. Gessler or Lyle's attorney for cross examination. This is actually his first time doing cross. So I don't know why it says further recross, but maybe it's still recross if you have two attorneys doing it. I don't know. All right, so Mr. Gessler says, where on the tennis court was Lyle Menendez when he turned and said this? The witness says, shall I show you with the pointer? He says, sure. He was over here, pointing. Do you know what that's called in the tennis court? No. Do you know back court from forecourt? I have no idea. Back court from forecourt? Forecourt? No, I do not. Do you know a net shot from lob? No, I do not. Do you know if he was in the Mr. Gessler? Mr. Gessler says, may I take the pointer a moment, Your Honor? The court says, sure. Mr. Gessler says, do you know if he was in this portion at the back court versus the nearer portion of the back court that is the right-hand side as we look at the diagram? I'm not familiar with those terms, sir. So you saw these incidents, whatever you saw, as you walked past this narrow gateway, is that right? Yes. And at that time, you would glance over towards the tennis court? Yes. How many times during the process of going between here where the switch was and over here by the guest house, how many times did you pass that entryway? 8 to 12. And which of those can you recall, whether it was near the first or near the 12th one, that you saw him direct his attention towards his parents? Oh, I don't remember which time it was. I don't recall. Do you remember anything about that day? Do you remember which time it was when he seemed to notice you and said, hi, how are you doing? It was just before I left. So the 10th time, 9th time? Could be. Could have been the 11th. And the time that you recall he was over in the upper part of what we call the back court. Is that right? When he apparently missed a shot, or I believe about the center court. About the center court near where all the lines intersect. Uh-huh. Somewhere in there. I was not taking notes. And what did you do wrong? What did he do wrong? What kind of shot did he miss at that point? I have no idea. So you don't know if it was an overhead or, no, I don't. Missed a shot entirely. I have no idea. Or he put it into the net. Really, I wouldn't know. You have no recollection of that. No recollection whatsoever. This is kind of good that he's putting it in like tennis terms for people who don't know tennis, because I don't know tennis, and I'm kind of glad that he's, making this guy, appear not credible as he should appear, because he's not. He says no recollection whatsoever. And you have no recollection of exactly what advice his mother might have given him on whatever shot it was that he might have missed. No, I do not. And you don't know exactly the terms that he used in saying whatever was wrong, except it seemed to be turned towards where his mother and father were seated. Correct. Mr. Gessler says, I have nothing further. The court says anything else? Ms. Abramson says, just one thing, but I'll wait for them first. They can go first. The court says she had nothing else. Ms. Nahara says, I have nothing further. Ms. Abramson says, just one. So we've got a little bit of further recross from Erik. Ms. Abramson says, do you think, Mr. Walker, that the table was so close to the tennis court that you had to go around it to walk down that walkway? I don't recall whether I did or not. Do you recall testifying to that before? No, I do not. Okay, I'm just being brain dead this morning, Your Honor. I do apologize. Here it is. Calling the court and counsel's attention to the previous trial transcript, page 22019. Ms. Nahara asks lines, starting with the question at line 21. Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object. Is it being used to refresh the witness's testimony? Ms. Abrams says, no, I'm going to read it. Ms. Nahara says, I'm going to object. It's hearsay. And I believe the witness testified he didn't remember. Ms. Abramson said, I'm using it for impeachment. The court says, overruled. Ms. Abramson says, thank you. Question at line 21, and this is directed at the witness. Question. You're saying the patio furniture is between the house and the tennis court. Answer. The day that I was there, that table was pushed right up close to the tennis court. When you walked up, or when you walked by, you did not walk between the tennis court and the table because they were so close, and you had to walk around the other side of it. Nothing further. The court says, anything else? Ms. Nahara says, I have nothing further. Court says, okay, thank you. You may step down, sir. You're excused. And your next witness, please. The state will call Ms. Mary Maher, and we will get into that in the next episode. She is the Rolex saleswoman. She did not testify in the first trial, so we will hear from her for the first time in on Tuesday's episode. So make sure you are subscribed. Please be sure to hit that like button on your way out. Let me know what you think of this testimony, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye now.